Yo, what is up, Greaseballs? Today we're going to be taking a look at Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's DLC, the Booster Course Pass, which has been adding new courses for about a year now, and will continue to add more for a good while. I was opposed to this game getting DLC, as I wanted Mario Kart 9 instead, and 8 is already a port of a game which had DLC. So I didn't get the pass until recently, and never reviewed Waves 1 and 2. In a recent video, I made a tier list to rank the courses in Wave 3. Here are those standings. If you want to hear my thoughts on those tracks, the video is linked in the top right corner. But in this video, we'll be turning back time to take a look at the 16 other tracks added to the game. Starting out, we have Paris Promenade from Mario Kart Tour. Tour is a mobile Mario Kart with a lot of real-world locations as tracks. And while a lot of us would have preferred a console Mario Kart 9, Tour is a thing that exists. I do think it's cool that they're putting these tracks on console, but Paris isn't particularly special. I'm putting it in B tier because I don't hate it, but it does feel kind of generic in terms of its racing. It feels like they put this into the DLC as a proof of concept of the real-world tour tracks, such as having the Eiffel Tower be a big set piece. It is a beautiful set piece, but in terms of the actual racing, the layout on this isn't too complicated or fun. Then we roll right into Toad Circuit from the 3DS, which is the first course of that game. Some people are opposed to this track's simplicity and would want it ranked lower, but I actually like it and I'm going to put it in B tier and could even consider A tier myself. Mario Kart 7 has really solid tracks, and even though Toad Circuit is simple, it is fun. It's a standard racetrack and has turns that are fun to execute, shortcut possibilities, and a nice Mario aesthetic. It has an optional gliding section, which I don't mind as it's not shoehorned in, and overall, the course doesn't do anything offensive to be worthy of a low rank. I think its simplicity lends to better races. Choco Mountain from the N64 will also be placed in B tier, making the first cup from the first wave of the DLC be very B tier heavy in my opinion. But it's not really bad, but it's not really gut punching with excitement. Choco Mountain is a great course and I'm glad to see it return. I like the Paracoopas that watch you, and the crystals in the cave, so it has a nice aesthetic. But from a racing perspective, I don't like how part of the track is cut for a 2-second gliding section. The gliding gimmick in Mario Kart 8 is just randomly put into a lot of tracks, and is rarely used in a meaningful way. In my other video, on Wave 3, I explained how Rock Mountain does use it effectively. This course doesn't do that though, and overall it doesn't excite me in the same ways that the S tier tracks that are upcoming do. Coconut Mall, a fan favorite from the Wii, is also going to be put into B tier for me. I was debating putting it in A tier because not much has changed and it's still an excellent course, but I put Maple Treeway from Wave 3 in A tier and feel like overall Maple Treeway is a better remake from the Wii era. The biggest change about this course is how the cars in the parking lot don't go back and forth. They do spin out towards you, but it's not quite the same. The cars alone aren't enough for this course to go from A to B tier though, but I think the aesthetic changes are a reason why some people don't prefer this course compared to the Wii one and would want it ranked lower. There are no Miis in the mall, and the Miis were incredibly iconic from the Wii. Like when you're racing on the Wii, you could have Obama and then also your friends and your family hanging out in the mall while you race. And because 8 doesn't have that, some of the charm is lost. Tokyo Blur, which fails to have alliteration like the other tour tracks, is going to go into C tier, but not because of alliteration, because it's mid. The Tokyo setting is cool, I guess. When I rated London and Berlin so high the other day, I think it's because they excited me so much with their gameplay after the snooze fest that is Tokyo. When we recorded this for the review, Philip said, "Tokyo didn't make me feel anything," which is pretty accurate. It has thwomps, but no real interesting gameplay, or racing turns, or track identity, which is kind of wild because it's fucking Tokyo. Like, I feel like it'd be cooler. I feel like traffic cars, like how Berlin had, would help improve this course. Now we jump right into rating Shroom Ridge from the DS, which is an automatic S tier. This is top tier Mario Kart. It was so fun on the DS, and it is so fun in 8 as well. It's one of my favorite courses of all time, and inclined me to get the DLC with its inclusion. It has traffic cars, which as you will find out, are one of my favorite gimmicks in Mario Kart. They make a track so dynamic, chaotic, and exciting. The curvy nature of this highway track is also great, resulting in a lot of great drifting. The feeling of just turning around this course is so good that I'm interested in playing it like solo and time trials, and that's not something a lot of tracks inspire me to do. It is a little odd that the traffic only goes in one direction on the course instead of driving both ways, but it's not that bad and the course is amazing. Next up we have Sky Garden from the GBA. I fucking love Sky Garden as it was one of my favorite tracks on the Game Boy as a young lad, but this remake just doesn't do it for me, so it's going into C tier. Whatever is in Mario Kart 8 is a fine track. If it was a brand new course, I'd probably put it in B tier, but because it is a remake of Sky Garden and it doesn't really look or feel anything like Sky Garden, it has to be C for me. It reminds me more of Cloud Top Cruise with the airship aesthetic in the background. And it's at fault for cutting a portion of the track for a pointless glider section, which by now is kind of apparent to the viewers that a pointless glider section is the biggest sin for a remake in my opinion. There's also a random mushroom that you can bounce off of, and I don't really know why because mushrooms weren't in the original. It's not a terrible reimagining, but it's not the reimagining I pictured or wanted, and it feels weak in comparison to the excellent GBA remake of Snowland, which is upcoming, and the already placed A tier Boo Lake reimagining from Wave 3. Ninja Hideaway, the next course, is an original course for the DLC. I'm putting it in A tier because it's new content and it's one of the best courses in the first wave of DLC. There are arguments to be made for putting it in S tier, but for me personally, A is enough. It's got a fabulous samurai theme with the Japanese castle, and the track excels at having multiple paths that the player can take by going up or down at multiple spots, and the player can often interchange between these two paths. The track does this two-route gimmick in an effective way, which other courses in 8's past have failed to do so. The race is excellent. I just prefer like a more tight-turning one-route track like Shroom Ridge in S tier, but this track is really good. Heading straight now into Waves 2 courses, we have New York Minute from Tor. I find this course pretty underwhelming, so I'll place it in C tier. It has a few parked taxis and a few Goombas walking through the park as obstacles, so it's arguably more interesting than Tokyo from a gameplay perspective, but like that's arguable. And it has a nice night aesthetic with bright lights, but the track isn't particularly fun in my opinion, and it's far from addicting. Like when you have all of these tracks from the DLC that you want to play, this isn't one that like I'd vote for online. I'd rather vote for the other ones in the wave. What I do want to vote for and play consistently is SNES Mario Circuit 3, a returning track and one that was also a retro course in Mario Kart Wii. I love Mario Circuit 3 and I'm glad that Mario Kart 8 didn't make any significant changes to it. All of the SNES tracks were flat, and Mario Circuit 3 in particular has great turns for drifting and a really fun general track to drift and race on. It is pure racing without any gimmicks, and they could have easily ruined this with a random gliding section, or adding a gimmick, or changing the layout drastically. They kept it in a pure, fun racing state, and the graphical upgrades look great, so this is a great course. Next up we have Calamari Desert from the N64. I love this track and I'm glad that it returned. I feel like it's one of the larger selling points of the DLC because trains are cool. This is going into S tier and would have gone into S tier even if they made no changes at all. It's just so cool of a track that you can, because you can cross the train tracks in this really western Grand Canyon looking environment. They reimagined the track as well, so on lap 2, you actually follow the train tracks and go through the train tunnel. I like this change because as a kid, I always wanted to, and actually did try driving on the train tracks and into the tunnel instead of on the actual track. This feels like a very natural reimagining of this course because of that, and it doesn't feel forced at all. Plus the tunnel is tight with the train and item gameplay, resulting in just a really fun time. Next up we have Waluigi Pinball from the DS. I'm putting this in A tier because it's a really good course. It's a fan favorite and I bet that a lot of people will want it in S tier. But I feel like a lot of the hype of the course comes from Waluigi being in the title, as his fans crave any crumbs that they can get when he basically gets zero attention elsewhere. So if it was just a pinball course, maybe it wouldn't be so hype. I don't know, let me know your thoughts on that. Anyway, this track is really fun. It has very fast-paced turns and it's really good for drifting, and it's obviously a giant pinball machine, so you have these giant balls rolling around that you have to dodge. Then we have Sydney Sprint from Tor, which I will place in B tier. I think it's objectively better than Tokyo and New York, but it doesn't excite me as much as Berlin. It feels like a bit more dynamic than Paris, and has some good turns for drifting and racing, which makes it more interesting to play than Tokyo. Basically, it feels like it has more replayability than some of the other Tor tracks, and that feels like it's appropriate to compare it to the other Tor tracks, as they're all in the same class of these real-world tracks from the mobile game. So we have to kind of compare them alongside each other. Next up is Snowland from the GBA. I love this track. I legitimately think it's my favorite course from all of the DLC so far, from all of the waves. It goes into S tier because the moment I played it, I knew it was great, and I keep wanting to race on this track. The GBA tracks are really memorable for me, and they all have really good layouts. And Nintendo took this flat track and gave it some elevation on its turns, which works nicely, and they upgraded the course visually with an ice lake and a stone bridge. This track has amazing shortcuts, and it's got amazing general turns for racing and drifting. It's such a smooth track without any gimmicks or really flaws to hold it down, and it looks stunning. Plus, it has those Mario penguins we all know and love. This is the perfect GBA reimagining in my opinion. Then we have Mushroom Gorge from the Wii, another fan favorite. This is a classic nostalgic track, so how does it rank? I think this is objectively the best Wii remake in the 8 DLC so far, beating Coconut Mall and Maple Treeway, for it has more faithfulness and therefore goes into S tier. This classic track is bouncy mushroom central and it's fun gameplay. Even my dad loves this course, so it's not just a greaseball gamer approved, it's like casual gamer approved. I like how they implemented gliding with the blue mushroom in this course, because they didn't require it or force it onto the players, which is good game design. There's some small differences from the Wii, but compared to Maple Treeway, which is missing its bridge and the mall missing its Mii's, Mushroom Gorge feels the most familiar. Lastly, we have Sky High Sundae, which is a brand new course for the DLC with a bright color palette, almost like Fall Guys. This is surprisingly a really solid track, and in my opinion, the best of the very new courses, beating Merry Mountain by a high margin, and I personally like it just a little bit more than Ninja Hideaway. The aesthetic is very fun, and the track has a lot of places to trick and build up speed. This is a quality course that I find more enjoyable than a fair amount of 8's base roster actually. And that's my opinions on all of the DLC. Are you enjoying the tracks? What do you think of this tier list? Anyway, subscribe to see me rate the next waves when they eventually release, and I'll catch you later, Greaseballs.